Hello readers by eyes and by ears, this is Mari Chen and welcome back to my YouTube channel. Today we are continuing with the reading of The Disabled Tyrant's Beloved Pet Fish Vol.1, also known as 残疾暴君的掌心鱼宠 by Xue Shan Fei Hu. We're covering chapters 17 through 20 today, so I hope you all enjoy. Chapter 17. The Fish Wants to Rebel. When he woke up, Li Yu was already at Prince Jing Manor, completely oblivious to the fact that a bunch of people at the palace had already judged him from head to tail. But even if he didn't know, he wouldn't care. By now, he was well aware of his identity as a fish. In short, he just had to blow his own bubbles and let those boring people talk all they wanted. It didn't really matter to him if his tank was in the palace or at the manor. He lived in a fish tank either way. What put him in high spirit was Wang Gonggong placing him in Prince Jing's bedroom, so he was still living with the prince. His fear of Prince Jing had left just as quickly as it came. He felt more trusting and sincere toward Prince Jing now and was more shameless than ever about acting cute. Ever since he transmigrated into this book, he had been preoccupied with two things: diligently performing his duties as a pet fish and worrying about his quests. The original storyline of the book was a long way removed from his fishy life. He slept well and ate well next to Prince Jing without ever needing to worry about the plot. After all, he was a fish. What could he do? But Prince Jing's assassination attempt had brought the plot line back into focus for him. Once the second prince, Mu Tianzhao, learned that Prince Jing had left the palace, he sent a trusted servant over with a letter. The servant very earnestly asked after Prince Jing's health, then relayed that in 3 days' time, the second prince would host a banquet in Prince Jing's honor, asking him to please attend. Wang Xi brought the letter to Prince Jing with a disdainful expression. Prince Jing gave a cold laugh and tossed the letter aside without opening it. From inside his tank, Li Yu stared at the letter, deep in thought. The second prince might be destined to live the life of cannon fodder, but he was still the emperor's current pick for crown prince. He was probably doing this to save some face after being humiliated at Qianqing Palace. No one on Prince Jing's side really respected the second prince. Despite being the oldest of the emperor's son, Mu Tianzhao often hid his true motivations behind a false smile and grand gestures. In front of the emperor, he pretended to care for his younger brothers, and around the younger princes, he pretended to be a good older brother. In reality, this older brother had sabotaged many of his younger brothers. As someone with the cheat code to the book, Li Yu had a pretty good idea of what the second prince was thinking. Amongst the other princes, Mu Tianzhao feared the third prince the most because he was the closest to him in age and fought with him on everything. But the one Mu Tianzhao hated the most was Prince Jing. Although Mu Tianzhao was the eldest, the line of succession didn't follow the order of birth. The D son always came first. As Prince Jing's mother was Empress Xiaohui, his status was much higher. If Prince Jing had been able to speak, there was no way the emperor would have given the throne to the second prince instead. Because of that, Prince Jing had always been a thorn poking at Mu Tianzhao's side. But he couldn't let that show in front of the emperor. The emperor had high hopes for the future crown prince's morals and conduct, and the second prince knew that. No matter how much he disliked Prince Jing, he had to treat him kindly. Ever since Lady Qiu's fish fiasco, the emperor had been rather displeased with him, and Mu Tianzhao had realized that nothing was guaranteed until the position of crown prince was officially his. He couldn't celebrate his victory yet. Fortunately, Prince Jing's near assassination gave him an excuse to feign concern for his brother's well-being in order to make up for last time. To the emperor, it would look like he had learned from his mistake and was making amends. The second prince had thought all of this through meticulously, except that Prince Jing didn't care at all and made it clear he wasn't going to attend. But the second prince refused to give up. He ran to the palace and begged the emperor for his help in convincing Prince Jing. Deep down, the emperor wanted Prince Jing to get along with the future crown prince, and since the second prince was willing to extend the olive branch, the emperor gave him his full support. To encourage Prince Jing to cooperate, and also to make things easier on the second prince, the emperor decided to act as the middleman, ordering the banquet to be held at Prince Ding's manor instead. He also ordered all the princes to attend and appoint Prince Ding as the host. This way, the second prince and Prince Ding could easily reconcile at the banquet. Thanks to the emperor's assistance, the second prince had achieved his goals. When Prince Ding received the edict, his expression darkened. The emperor knew that Prince Ding was naturally cold and withdrawn. Never mind entertaining the other princes, just having a few more guests than usual at his manor would sour his mood. The emperor especially sent head eunuch Luo to explain that the servants and chefs would be sent over at the time of the banquet, taking away any burden of preparation off Prince Ding's shoulders. All he had to do was show up as the host. The emperor had gone to all this trouble just so his sons could form a bit of brotherly bond. Prince Ding sat by himself in his room for a while, staring at all the arrangements. He no longer had any objections. As soon as Wang Xi caught wind of anything happening in Prince Ding's manor, Liu Yu pretty much knew as well. Prince Ding had rejected the second prince, and now that the emperor wanted Prince Ding to host a banquet out of the blue, even if he was thinking with his fishtail instead of his head, it was obvious that the second prince must have hit a roadblock and gone through the emperor to make this happen. Liu Yu was speechless. But a banquet was a banquet. It had nothing to do with a fish like him. In any event, the second prince wasn't going to get what he wanted. They were all just passengers on Prince Ding's journey. But that reminded Liu Yu. There had been a banquet Prince Ding had held at the beginning of the book. It was where he'd run into the other male lead of the book. This book, the Tyrant and his delicate concubine. In other words, the delicate concubine. To directly quote the nauseating words the book had used, their fates were then forever entangled. Liu Yu had been a transmigrated fish for a while, but the quests the system gave him had all been weird ones. It had never tried to involve him in the plot of the story. With such a limited area of movement and only being able to interact with a limited amount of people or things, even if he wanted to do something, it wouldn't be easy. It was just like the fish scamming system had said. The purpose of his existence was to change the tyrant's personality. If he was able to do that, it didn't really matter how the plot progressed. Liu Yu truly didn't care about the plot, but the second prince's actions made him wonder, was this banquet the same as the one in the book? With Prince Ding's temper, there was no way he'd willingly host a banquet like this. The book never mentioned the reason behind Prince Ding's banquet, which meant there were no inconsistencies between the current reality and the book. Everything matched up. All of Liu Yu's scales were standing on end. Was Prince Ding about to meet the love of his life, the delicate little concubine? That had to be it. After all, in the world of the book, one main character was the top, the other was the bottom. They were fated to meet. No matter how convoluted the process was, they were always meant to be together. Hadn't he always known this book was a story about Prince Ding and his little concubine? He was just a fish. Why hurt his fish brain by thinking so much? Liu Yu shook his head, doing his best not to care about it, and went to play with the jewels in his tank instead. But he just wasn't interested in them. Maybe he had played with them too much. The emperor's edict went out. The younger ones, the 7th and 8th princes, were only children, and they still lived in the palace. When they heard that Prince Ding was holding a banquet, they were eager to come out and play. The other 2 older princes were much more mature. The 3rd and 6th princes both politely responded that it was a rare opportunity for all the brothers to gather in one place, and that they would prepare elaborate gifts. The 3rd prince, Mu Tianming, even suggested bringing some servants who were adept at singing and dancing to liven things up further. Pleased to see his sons getting along, the emperor accepted all these suggestions on Prince Ding's behalf. Although Prince Ding didn't need to worry about planning the banquet, Wang Xi still kept an eye on things for his master. Liu Yu listened as Wang Xi Gonggong rambled on and on. After a while, he sank to the bottom of the tank, unwilling to resurface. The 3rd prince's suggestion basically confirmed the plot, because one of the servants who were adept at singing and dancing was the delicate little concubine in the original book. His appearance stood out amongst the crowd, and the moment Prince Ding laid eyes on him during a performance, it was love at first sight. Unfortunately, the little concubine was the third prince's servant, and for about half the book, he didn't even like Prince Ting. But this was the first and only time Prince Ting had fallen in love. The high and mighty tyrant suffered setbacks at every turn and nearly lost his life, but he couldn't even have the one thing he yearned for. How cliched. It was the typical, I love you, but you don't love me, and yet I still love you. A lot of readers were into this kind of thing, though. Apparently, it was relatable for them. How could they do that? How could they torment Prince Ting? When Li Yu read the book, it didn't bother him in the least. Back then, Prince Ting had just been a character in a book. But now Prince Ting was a real person to him. Li Yu was pretty close to him and had seen many sides of the prince that nobody else had. He considered Prince Ting to be his master. Li Yu was furious, angrier than if he himself had been the one going through the torment. The dejected little carp took his anger out on the jewels in the tank for a while, until the sullen thought came to him. So what if he was mad? The person who liked the little concubine was Prince Ting, and Li Yu was just a pet fish. Perhaps one day, the little concubine would become his second owner, and he would have to earn favor with him the same way he had to earn favor with Prince Ting. Eventually, he would have to live together with this second owner. Even just the thought of it was unbearable. He suddenly understood the lost feeling other pets had when their owners abruptly got into a relationship. A formerly doting pet owner could end up eventually losing interest in their pet. If the second owner got along with the pet, it would be fine. But if they didn't, would the original owner do anything to the second owner? No. If it came down to it, the owner would definitely get rid of the pet. Li Yu laughed bitterly. He would never allow himself to land in such a situation. If Prince Ting wanted to go through the motions of the plot, he could go right ahead. It wasn't like Li Yu could stop it from moving forward. He was just a fish. But he had to at least do whatever he could, right? Since Prince Ting was holding a banquet, numerous visitors would be coming and going. Prince Ting would be too busy meeting the little concubine to worry about Li Yu. That meant he could turn into a human without any reservations and do whatever he wanted. He just didn't want to meet the second owner. Okay, I know where this is going. Chapter 18. The Fish Wants to Transform. Li Yu decided he would use the transformation medicine on the day of the banquet. When he completed the Share a Bed quest not too long after, he had received a bizarre reward. A lifelike, life-size fish plushie that was nearly a perfect replica of his own fish body. All the prizes before had been inventory space or enhancement to his abilities, so he had really been looking forward to it. Except it turned out he had busted his ass just to get an apparently useless object. Li Yu immediately thought the system was scamming him once again and didn't collect the reward. Now that he was planning on turning human, though, the toy didn't seem so worthless after all. If he turned human and the fish tank was empty, it would only be a matter of time before a passing servant noticed. He'd be found out immediately. It was almost as if this fish plushie was there to help him sneak out. It lay completely motionless in the water, but from a distance, it really did look like him. The next step after sharing a bed with the tyrant was gain a deep understanding of the tyrant. Li Yu was used to weird quests by now, and these clickbait titles no longer fazed him. As usual, when he asked for clarification, the fish scamming system pretended it was dead. Gain a deep understanding was even more vague than interact or get along. Li Yu wasn't sure where to begin. He'd tried out a bunch of different things so far, but he still hadn't made any progress. He decided to set it aside for the time being. With only 2 hours to be human, Li Yu meticulously planned everything out. Most people would be at Ninghui Hall in Prince Ting's manor, where the banquet was due to be held. Between the servants and chefs from the palace and the entourage accompanying each of the princes, the manor would be bustling and lively. With so many people coming and going, Li Yu didn't need to worry that he'd draw any attention by showing up as a completely new face. First things first, he wanted to make his way to the kitchen and eat human food. Since becoming a fish, all he'd been able to eat was fish food. The red fish food he was given was made from flour, which only served to heighten his craving for ordinary human food. He wanted to stuff himself with normal, home-style stir-fry. The Manor's kitchen definitely wouldn't be short on food, since they had so many guests to serve. From what he'd heard from Wang Xi, the chefs would usually make several plates of each dish at banquets like this because they were afraid of running out of food. If Liu just tasted a bit of each dish, he wouldn't even come close to finishing any of them. After eating, he planned to take a stroll through Prince Jing's manor. He hadn't gotten the chance to do that yet. Apparently, the emperor had arranged for an opera troupe to perform, so he could watch people from ancient times perform opera and snack on some sunflower seeds. Originally, he also wanted to take a gander outside the manor, but he was afraid he wouldn't be able to get back in. There were guards stationed in front of the manor, and he didn't have enough time. He had a contingency plan, though. His inventory was already filled with clear water and fish food, so if he brought a tea bowl along, he was set. If something did happen and he couldn't make it back to the bedroom before time ran out and he turned back, all he'd need to do was jump into the tea bowl. There was nothing to fear. He had thought of everything there was to think of. No, you haven't. His plan seemed foolproof. Keyword seemed. In order to prevent people from figuring out that the fish plushie wasn't the same as the real him, Liu made sure to act less lively in the days leading up to the banquet. Most of the time, he just laid on the white rock bed. Prince Jing came to see him a few times, and Liu swam toward him out of habit to nuzzle into his finger. When he got close, though, he remembered he had to keep his distance, so with a swish of his tail, he swam off coldly. Prince Jing didn't know what to make of it. On the day of the banquet, Wang Xi went to Ninghui Hall with Prince Jing early in the day. Although the emperor had everything taken care of, as the host, Prince Jing still had to greet the guests. Wang Xi also tried to help with some things on the side. As per Prince Jing's wishes, several servants were ordered to guard the bedroom Li Yu was in. They didn't have to be there the entire time, lest the little carp get a scare when it came out for a stroll, but they still had to come by and check on the fish every now and then. Prince Jing sure knew how to make things harder for other people. As soon as Prince Jing left, Li Yu accepted the fish plushie reward and positioned it on the white rock bed. He looked at it for a while and still felt a bit worried, so he covered it with the leaf blanket. From far away, it really did look like he was sleeping. With the plushie arranged to his satisfaction, Li Yu leaped into the nearest tea bowl. It was time to accept the transformation medicine. He took a deep breath. When the system asked him again, this time he chose accept. In the blink of an eye, the transformation medicine bottle fell into his fins. At first, he'd been worried that he might not be able to open the bottle as a fish, but the bottle seemed to be able to read his thoughts. As soon as he wanted to use it, the seal just disappeared. Could it be another trap? Now that the transformation medicine was in his grasp, Li Yu faltered. He could hear music playing faintly in the distance, and he knew the dancing and singing that had been specially prepared for this banquet was starting. The little concubine was about to show up, if he hadn't already. The fateful meeting was about to take place, right? Well, fateful meeting or not, he only had 2 hours. He was just going to be eating next door. No big deal. Li Yu stopped hesitating. Feeling a little complicated about it, he downed the medicine in one gulp. The medicine didn't taste like anything. After drinking it, he smacked his lips a few times. In the next second, his vision blurred. Fuck! He didn't know the medicine would have side effects. The little carp gradually lost consciousness. Ninghui Hall. The third prince, Mu Tianming, rose many times to toast Prince Jing. Mu Tianzhao beat him in almost every aspect. Mu Tianming, unlike Mu Tianzhao, had a mother who was of lower status than Lady Chu, and he was also a few years younger. Ever since he made the decision to compete with the second prince, Mu Tianming had been opposing Mu Tianzhao in everything. Since Prince Jing was born with a disability and had no hope of ever ascending to the throne, he posed no threat to Mu Tianming. If Mu Tianzhao didn't like Prince Jing, then Mu Tianming obviously had to be on Prince Jing's side. If Mu Tianzhao wanted to suck up to Prince Jing, then he would have to get in the way. As long as the second prince was unhappy, the third prince was happy. Although Prince Jing wasn't particularly useful and the emperor had never granted him any real power, he nevertheless had Empress Xiaohui's family, the house of Chang'an, behind him. That was a huge advantage. Over the years, Mu Tianming had given Prince Jing plenty of gifts, but they had all been rejected. He had been trying to come up with a reason to approach Prince Jing when Mu Tianzhao's mother, noble consort Chu, did something stupid. The third prince immediately jumped at the chance, but Prince Jing was not the kind of person who could be swayed by gifts. He was very difficult to kiss up to. None of the precious gifts had worked, so Mu Tianming and his trusted subordinates came up with numerous other ideas. They'd realized, while Prince Jing didn't lack anything, the one thing that was missing from his manor was wives. And so Mu Tianming had decided to try gifting a few bed partners to Prince Jing. Not only could they entertain Prince Jing, he could also have someone around to speak on his behalf. It would kill two birds with one stone. All the dancers he'd brought to Prince Jing's manor were unrivaled in beauty. The lead dancer was a young man with an elegant and refined appearance, gleaming red lips and white teeth. With makeup, he was more beautiful than the female dancers. Mu Tianming had no idea what Prince Jing's taste might be, so he prepared both men and women. What if, as they danced, one of them just so happened to catch Prince Jing's eye? Once the banquet began, Mu Tianming was the first to toast Prince Jing, but Prince Jing didn't like to drink, so he didn't accept. Then Mu Tianming offered to bring out his dancers to perform for Prince Jing, but Prince Jing also didn't like to watch dance, so he declined this as well. Mu Tianming was suddenly put in an awkward position. The sixth prince, Mu Tianxiao, who was the third prince's lackey, hurried to smooth the situation over for Mu Tianming. He glanced at the seventh and eighth princes, who, after so long, were finally able to leave the palace. Having heard there was a fresh new dance to watch, the two children couldn't be any more excited. Although Prince Jing didn't mingle with the adult princes much, he usually wouldn't oppose the younger ones. With Wang Xi's gentle encouragement, Prince Jing at least relented and permitted the dance to take place. At Mu Tianming's orders, the dancers finally emerged. The third prince had put in a lot of effort to plan this. After finding out that Prince Jing had acquired a pet fish recently, he specially choreographed a dance of fish and lotus. Most of the dancers wore green, playing the part of lotus leaves, while the lead dancer was dressed in white, transforming into an elegant lotus blossom. The third prince thought he had outdone himself. Prince Jing forced himself to watch. The third prince had said this was a dance of fish and lotus, but he didn't see a single fish from beginning to end. There was a dancer in white with a striking appearance, but his eyes held sorrow and resentment and seemed to glimmer with unshed tears. Rather than enjoyment, Prince Jing felt anger. Had this dancer been mistreated? Mu Tianzhao watched as Prince Jing stared fixedly at the lead dancer, and his heart nearly fell out of his chest out of fear that Mu Tianming was about to get Prince Jing over to his side. He rose as well and said sincerely, "Fifth brother, I'd like to personally apologize, as your brother, for the offense that my mother caused a few days ago. I hope you can find it in yourself to forgive her." As soon as the second prince spoke, servants took the chance to push the third prince's dancers to the side. The third prince was furious, but his hands were tied. He wouldn't dare fight with the second prince in front of a crowd, leaving him no choice but to swallow his irritation and observe the situation quietly. At Mu Tianzhao's mention of noble consort Chu, Prince Jing scoffed, and Wang Xi immediately spoke up on his behalf. "All will be fine if Lady Chu self-reflects properly, as the emperor ordered. His Highness obviously won't ignore the Emperor's will and pursue the situation further. Mu Tianzhao's mouth was dry. He had originally planned to ask for Prince Jing's forgiveness and then request for him to shorten the noble consort's house arrest. Why did he feel like Prince Jing had blocked any room for further discussion? Your brother has another request. Having failed once, Mu Tianzhao continued shamelessly. My mother lost a luminous pearl. I heard one of Fifth Brother's servants picked it up. Thank you for keeping it safe, but if it's convenient for you, I ask that you please return it. The luminous pearl that Lady Chu had lost had been precious, but the way she had lost it was humiliating. In actuality, noble consort Chu never wanted to see the pearl ever again. Mu Tianzhao was just making up an excuse. If Prince Jing returned the pearl, it would give off the impression that he and Prince Jing were on decent terms. The Emperor loved seeing the two of them get along, even if it was fabricated. The second prince wanted the luminous pearl. Prince Jing exchanged looks with Wang Xi. The two of them instantly thought of the pearl lying at the bottom of the fish tank. Prince Jing didn't really care for noble consort Chu's pearl. He had given the little carp many jewels since then, and it hadn't touched the pearl in ages. He had been meaning to secretly get rid of it, but if the second prince wanted it, he might as well return it. Prince Jing nodded at Wang Xi. Mu Tianzhao was privately pleased. As long as Prince Jing handed over the luminous pearl, this would all be over. But Wang Gonggong chirped, Second prince, please come with this old servant to retrieve the pearl. Mu Tianzhao didn't know how to react. He had been the one to ask, and Prince Jing didn't oppose it, so the second prince couldn't very well back down, especially with all the other princes watching. He followed Wang Xi through the winding hallways to the interior of the manor. He was a little hesitant, afraid one of Prince Jing's henchmen would launch an attack from the dark, but thankfully he made it out in one piece. Wang Xi led Mu Tianzhao into a room, pointed to a huge crystal fish tank, and said with a chuckle, There was an accident with the luminous pearl and it sank to the bottom. Second prince, you may go ahead and retrieve it. Mu Tianzhao was horrified. Wang Xi was clearly making his life difficult on purpose. The second prince was appalled. What was Prince Jing doing? How did the luminous pearl end up in the fish tank? It was a colossal fish tank. He could barely see the end of it, and it was packed with jewels. How was he supposed to find it? Mu Tianzhao gritted his teeth and peered in. He wanted to locate the pearl first, then call for someone to retrieve it for him. He spotted a fish lying on a bed of white rocks. There was even a leaf covering the fish. How unusual. This fish seemed like the one Prince Jing had brought, his beloved pet fish. Mu Tianzhao and Lady Chu had both suffered at the fins of this fish. Immediately, the second prince was on high alert. He wanted to stay far away from this accursed fish. That was when he realized there was something strange about the way the fish was lying there. It was so stiff all over, not the slightest movement. Prince Jing's fish seemed to have died again. The second prince's stomach dropped. Chapter 19. The fish disappeared. Before all this, the second prince would have never spared a second thought for a fish. But this fish was different. He had to tread carefully. This fish had made serious trouble for him before. The wretched thing seemed to be dead, but it was all too possible that it was just playing a trick on him. After the emperor put noble consort Chu on house arrest, she had screamed herself hoarse that the fish was all part of Prince Jing's scheme. The second prince had similar suspicions, but if he wanted to save his image in front of the emperor, if he wanted to make sure the crown prince position was firmly his, then he couldn't ignore Prince Jing. He certainly couldn't show him any outward disrespect. Prince Jing's position was unique. He could be considered a test for whoever was next in line. The crown prince had to make the emperor think he was benevolent and treated all his brothers well, especially Prince Jing, who was of nobler birth than he. So even if the second prince and noble consort Chu had to suffer a little bit now, it would be worth it. After what had happened with Lady Chu, he knew that no matter what this fish did, he couldn't take it lightly. In the face of sudden change, he himself must remain unchanged. Since Wang Xi had come here with him, As long as he pretended he hadn't noticed anything, Prince Sting couldn't pin the blame on him. So that was exactly what he did. But he couldn't help it. His eyes kept being drawn back to the cursed fish. It had been a while now, and the fish still didn't so much as move. The second prince's eyelid twitched. That fish might really be dead. He had to get out of here as soon as possible. The second prince turned to Wang Xi. I still have something to take care of at home, so I'll be taking my leave. If the luminous pearl is found, please have someone bring it back to me. Wang Xi smiled and shook his head. Since your highness asked for it personally, you must, of course, take a look yourself first. Wang Xi had been with Prince Sting for many years and frequently came in contact with Mu Tianzhao, but this was the first time Mu Tianzhao had thought this old geezer was hard to get rid of. The more he wanted to leave, the harder it was for him to do so. Right at that moment, a servant who had been designated to take care of the fish walked in. He immediately sensed something was wrong and pointed at the fish in the tank. He hurried to say, Wang Gongong, look, His Highness's fish isn't moving. Mu Tianzhao let out a barrage of curses in his head. Wang Xi quickly ran over and examined the fish from several angles. He knew this little carp had a problem of constantly falling asleep. It hadn't been moving around much recently. Wang Xi hadn't thought much of it when he saw the fish lying there quietly, but now that the servant had mentioned it, it was a little too quiet. Had something happened to the fish? Wang Xi carefully scrutinized the fish for a little while more before saying uncertainly, Don't take your eyes off the fish. I'm going to go get His Highness. His expression was grim as he turned to Mu Tianzhao. Second Prince, His Highness will be here shortly. Please wait a moment. Mu Tianzhao had suffered at the fins of this fish before, and the fear still lingered. And now Wang Xi was trapping him here, which made him rather angry. What do you mean by this? What does Prince Sting's fish have to do with me? I didn't even touch it. Oh? Second Prince, this old servant didn't say anything. Why are you getting so flustered? Wang Xi chuckled insincerely. Perhaps you weren't aware, but this fish is our Highness's precious pet. Even the Emperor knows about it. It's nothing personal. Anyone who enters this room must wait for His Highness to make a decision. He really was relying on his master's authority, and even had the audacity to bring up the Emperor. Mu Tianzhao's gaze went cold. If even one of Prince Sting's servants dared to treat him like this, then what kind of attitude would Prince Sting have toward him? Not for the first time, his mind strayed to the crown prince position. Fine. He'd let this mute have his moment of smugness. Once he was on the throne, he'd make sure he wouldn't even be able to cry. Mu Tianzhao forced his expression to relax. He said, Let's just wait for my fifth brother then. Ninghui Hall. After the second prince left, Mu Tianming suggested the dancers continue. The third prince refused to let the second prince disrupt his hard work. Prince Sting didn't care either way. There was no harm in the performance continuing. The first few notes of the music had only just filled the air when a familiar little servant sprinted in. Despite how far away he was, it was still clear the servant was in a hurry and anxious. Prince Sting vaguely recognized the servant. He always followed Wang Xi around. He waved the servant over. The servant immediately approached and whispered into the prince's ear. The servant wasn't clear on the details either. He had just been sent over in a hurry by Wang Xi. Following Wang Gongong's instructions, he relayed that something had happened to Master Fish and that they had to consult Prince Sting, but the servant couldn't elaborate on the specifics. Prince Sting remembered that the second prince had gone to retrieve the luminous pearl. It was more than likely the second prince was involved, which explained Wang Xi's ambiguous instructions. Did the second prince harm his fish? Prince Sting's expression hardened. With a swish of his sleeves, he sent the singers and dancers away. The third prince made to protest, but Prince Sting just waved him off and headed into the inner chambers. He quickly arrived at his room. Prince Sting and all the servants were waiting there, along with the second prince, who had a somewhat ugly look on his face. Prince Sting completely ignored the second prince and, before Wang Xi could say anything, made a beeline for the crystal fish tank. His fish lay there quietly on the white rock bed. Prince Sting studied it for a while, then reached into the water and touched the fish's head. As soon as his fingers brushed its scales, his expression changed. He immediately scooped the little carp out. Wang Xi inched closer, and out of the corner of his eye, he saw Prince Jing squeeze the fish flat. Wang Xi realized quickly, "Your Highness, this isn't a real fish." Prince Jing threw the fake fish at Wang Xi. Wang Xi held it in his hand, turning it around and around. From a distance, this fake fish really did look like the real thing, but it felt soft and had no bones. How was it made? The little carp wasn't in the fish tank, and a fake fish had taken its place. Now this was a disaster. "Your Highness, who would do such a thing?" Placing a fake fish in the fish tank was clearly a tactic to fool them. Who had the nerve? And more importantly, where was the real fish? Mutianzhao had planned to clarify the situation, to tell them that this time the fish dying had nothing to do with him, but now it turned out the fish was fake? He was utterly speechless, and worst of all, he was the only outsider to have stepped foot in Prince Jing's room. Prince Jing's gaze landed on him, pinning him in place. The second prince felt like he had fallen into a trap again, this time by a fake fish. He wanted to defend himself, say he had absolutely nothing to do with the fake fish or the real one. But would Prince Jing believe him? The second prince was about to protest when something flashed before his eyes. The next thing he knew, Prince Jing's sword was held against his neck. "Fifth brother, what are you doing? I had nothing to do with this." The second prince was scared out of his wits. It felt like Prince Jing's sword was about to slice through his throat. He never thought Prince Jing would threaten him over a fish. Prince Jing's sharp gaze flickered over to Wang Xi, and Wang Xi spoke for him. "Second prince, please tell the truth." "I really am. I only came to retrieve the luminous pearl. I may not like this fish, but if I had really done something, why would I put a fake fish in? Wouldn't it make more sense for me to just throw it away?" The second prince was desperate to live. Prince Jing studied the second prince for a while, eyes narrowed, considering the veracity of his words. Cold sweat poured down the second prince's face in rivulets. Finally, Prince Jing lowered his sword and ordered people to escort the second prince out. Considering that his life was on the line, Mutianzhao was probably speaking the truth. There was no need for him to do something in such a roundabout way. Besides, if anything like this happened, the second prince would be the first suspect. There really was no reason for him to do something so stupid. It probably wasn't Mutianzhao. But the fake fish was clearly there as a distraction to keep him from discovering the fish had vanished. Who would go to such lengths? And to what end? Prince Jing had acted out of anger just now, using violence to try to force Mutianzhao to tell the truth. Now that he had calmed down a bit, he started ordering people to investigate whether anything was amiss with the room. After a round of inspecting, the servants discovered the window to the south was ajar. Prince Jing didn't usually open his windows. That specific window faced his garden. There had been quite a few tea bowls on the ground so that the little carp could come out of its tank and roam around. Prince Jing had a good memory and could recall the exact location of each tea bowl. After counting, he realized one was missing. The simplest inference was that someone had used the tea bowl to steal the fish, then escaped through the window. Prince Jing contemplated the situation some more. Then he ordered the servants to search through the room and see if anything else was missing or had been moved. After a while, Wang Xi came back to report. "Your Highness, someone has gone through your closet. A set of inner robes and underwear are gone. Nothing else is missing or has been touched." Prince Jing didn't know how to react. Wang Xi was confused too. Someone had stolen both His Highness's fish and his underwear? There was clearly something wrong with this thief. On Prince Jing's orders, Wang Xi commanded the servants to investigate anyone suspicious in the direction of the gardens, especially anyone holding a tea bowl. Prince Jing would stop at nothing, even if it meant having to dig into the ground to find his little carp. While Prince Jing was busy trying to find his fish, a youth was making his way down the ornamental mountain. An hour ago, after drinking the transformation medicine, Li Yu had lost consciousness. When he came to, he realized he had transformed to his human form. Li Yu was absolutely elated. He was even more ecstatic upon looking at his reflection in the bronze mirror. He had returned to his original appearance, but immediately after that, he was faced with a fresh new danger. Now that he'd turned back into a human, he wasn't wearing any fucking clothes. Liu hadn't thought about the issue of clothing, because when he was a fish, he was covered in scales that were part of his body. As soon as he turned human, though, his clothes were nowhere to be seen. The fish scamming system hadn't mentioned such an important detail. Fine. It was the fish scamming system after all. The most pressing thing right now was to find some clothes. Liu had transformed in Prince Ting's room. When he was a fish, he saw Prince Ting every day, so he obviously knew where the prince kept his clothes. There was only Prince Ting's clothes here anyway. Liu went to look in the closet. There were all kinds of clothes in Prince Ting's closet, but he was much taller than Liu. In addition, long robes and wide sleeves were more common in ancient times. He was going to look ridiculous in Prince Ting's outer robes, and without the proper robes inside, when he walked, it would be easy to accidentally reveal something. But that wasn't the biggest concern right now. Most of the servants would be able to recognize their master's clothes. Liu was afraid of having his cover blown or rousing suspicion, but he couldn't just walk around in the nude. After some careful thought, he picked out a set of Prince Ting's inner robes and underwear. Robes worn against the skin were always slightly smaller than outer robes. Inner robes also didn't have any embroidery or patterns, so they ought to be less conspicuous. Plus, he had taken the clothes from a closet Prince Ting barely touched. It was probably either new or a spare. He wouldn't feel too weird wearing it. Anyway, he needed to look at the big picture here. If Prince Ting had worn it, he just had to grit his teeth and bear it. An innocent boy like him couldn't just run around buck naked. There was nothing he could do about the shoes. Prince Ting's feet were larger than his. He might as well go barefoot if he had to wear such ill-fitting shoes. Besides, it was easier to move around without them. Back in his own world, he had short hair, but in a rare display of benevolence, the system had changed it up for him. He now had medium-length hair down to his shoulders, which wouldn't stand out too much in the ancient world. Liu casually gathered his hair at the back of his neck and changed into the robes. He then filled a tea bowl with clear water and put some fish food in it, successfully combining the three objects into one, and stored it in his inventory. He glanced one last time at the life-size fish plushie lying perfectly in its place in the fish tank. As long as no one went to touch it, they wouldn't suspect a thing. Everything was ready. Liu deliberately opened the window closet to the garden. He, of course, wouldn't leave through the window. There were probably loads of guests wandering in the garden. This was just to divert attention. Then he opened a different window, one facing an ornamental mountain with no guards in sight. After clambering onto the windowsill, Liu carefully wiped away his footprints and ducked inside a hole in the ornamental mountain. Chapter 20. A Fleeting Glance. Perhaps Liu had been a fish for too long and was too used to the swishing motions of swimming, but it was a little harder than he expected to control his legs. At first, it felt like he was floating rather than walking, and he kept stumbling. But this feeling didn't persist for very long, and he soon got used to it. Because he didn't have suitable shoes, his feet were bare. Luckily, the weather was warm, so he didn't feel cold. Prince Ting's manor was kept very clean, and by paying attention to the ground beneath his feet, he managed to avoid getting into any accidents after he made his way out of the ornamental mountain. But with bare feet and only inner robes, he was a terrible eyesore. This was also why the servants who ran into the unfamiliar Liu didn't dare approach and question him. Prince Ting was hosting a banquet today. The manor was filled with guests, all of whom were nobility or aristocracy and would need an invitation to enter. There were guards keeping watch outside the manor too, so there wouldn't be strangers wandering within the manor walls. Someone bold enough to dress like this was probably some lord's son acting out. But it also wasn't appropriate to just let this little lord wander around like this. Someone had already dashed off to retrieve Wang Gongong so he could take care of it. Other people followed Li Yu from a distance. A kind auntie servant saw Li Yu walking barefoot and couldn't bear to watch any longer. She came up to him and asked in a gentle voice, "Which family are you from? Why are you dressed like this?" Having heard Wang Xi talk quite a lot, Li Yu didn't have any problems speaking to other people in ancient times. He replied vaguely, "Ma'am, I'm a guest here. I got lost." He thought he had everything down pat when he had been planning this all out, but complications kept cropping up. First, he had neither clothes nor shoes. Then, after he figured that out, he thought the kitchens would be easy to find, except Prince Jing's manor was way too big. He was too afraid to ask for directions and was starting to get frustrated and anxious. It had already been hard enough to find his way out of the ornamental mountain. The auntie could see that this young man's face was clean, delicate, and likable. His dark eyes were exceptionally spirited, looking like a pair of black beads submerged in mercury. She couldn't help the fondness flooding her heart. "If the little lord is lost, how about I take you to see Wang Gongong?" said the auntie. There was no way he could come face to face with Wang Xi. "No need," he said hurriedly. "Wang Gongong must be at Ninghui Hall right now. I'll be able to find my way back. But, auntie, do you know where the kitchens are?" He rubbed his stomach, red-faced. The auntie immediately understood and chuckled. "Is this little lord hungry? If you think me trustworthy, please follow me." The auntie was wearing what the servants at the Princess Manor wore, and she had an apron on. Li Yu implicitly trusted Prince Xing's servants, so he followed the auntie into the kitchens. Li Yu talked with her the whole way there and found out the auntie was a cook in Prince Xing's kitchens. Li Yu felt like he had hit the jackpot. There was no way he was going to go hungry with the cook leading the way. This auntie's last name was Xu. When the two arrived at the kitchens, Li Yu's eyes nearly fell out of his sockets. Here at last were the dishes that he had been dreaming about day in and day out. Auntie Xu brought out a plate with a smile and asked Li Yu what he liked to eat. Li Yu stared at the food, drooling, and listed out a whole bunch of dishes shamelessly. Auntie Xu picked out a few based on his preferences and carried over 2 whole plates, along with a wooden bowl packed full of steaming white rice on a tray. "These dishes have already been brought out to the masters, so they won't need them anymore. These are all extras, and no one's touched them yet. Please eat as much as you want." This was the first time anyone had been so kind to him since he turned back into a human. The thick steam rising from the food made his eyes water. He thanked Auntie Xu, accepted the bowl, and began wolfing it down. The unique taste of human food bloomed on the tip of his tongue, making him feel like his time as a fish had been nothing but a dream. And yet, staring down at his bare feet, he remembered the medicine was just a temporary fix. Very soon, he would turn back into a fish. Auntie Xu saw that he was inhaling the food as though he hadn't been fed in several days and urged him to slow down in case he choked. Li Yu smiled but didn't explain. "Little lord, why are you alone?" Auntie Xu asked hesitantly. The youth before her was about the same age as her younger son, and she couldn't help but feel concerned. Her words brought his worries back to mind, but he couldn't mention Prince Jing outright, so he replied, My master is about to get married. He won't have time for me anymore, so I came out for a stroll." Auntie Xu paused. Master? Married? Was this youth the male concubine of some noble? No wonder he had run out in such a rumpled state. He had probably been tossed out by the future wife and gone hungry for some time. Auntie Xu's imagination conjured up a whole scene of the D-wife dealing with the side wife. Li Yu made it sound pitiful, but she didn't look down on him. On the contrary, she patted his hand kindly and comforted him. "Don't worry. Stay here for a little longer and eat some more." But he couldn't continue walking around in just his inner robes. After taking a quick glance at Li Yu's size, Auntie Xu pulled out a set of her younger son's clean robes and a pair of cloth shoes. These robes were a jade green, the same color as the seaweed that Li Yu liked. Li Yu had just been worrying about what to do about his clothes and shoes, and he was delighted by this turn of events. He briefly considered discarding what he wore already as he changed, but in the end, he decided to continue wearing Prince Jing's inner robes and underwear. Auntie Xu probably thought Li Yu would feel awkward if she probed any further, so she didn't continue asking. Finally getting the chance to indulge in human food, Li Yu only very reluctantly put down his chopsticks when there was a slight bulge rounding his stomach. After he finished, he followed Auntie Xu around in the kitchens, using it as an opportunity to digest the food he just ate, a habit he'd picked up from being in Prince Jing's care and maintained even as a human. The ancient kitchen was bustling with activity. The assortment of knives and cutting boards caught Li Yu's attention, but he knew to look only with his eyes and keep his hands to himself so the cooks didn't get mad. He also noticed a fish basket and remembered the noble consort's thousand-carp soup from when he'd first transmigrated. He asked curiously, "Auntie, are you going to make thousand-carp soup too?" Auntie Xu laughed. "That's a dish for birthday banquets in the palace. The prince's manor doesn't have such customs. His Highness did have fish soup often in the past, but he stopped now." As Auntie Xu spoke, it seemed more and more like she was just talking to herself, but Li Yu heard and thought, "Is it because of me?" After all, Prince Jing really did dote on him. As he thought about all the different ways Prince Jing was good to him, Li Yu couldn't help feeling a little sad. Auntie Xu smiled as she asked him, "Did you ask about fish soup because you wanted some?" Li Yu shook his head emphatically. Why would he, a fish, drink fish soup? Please, no. He changed the subject and asked Auntie Xu where the opera stage had been set up. According to his plan, after eating and enjoying a little opera, he should be heading back. He had already lost a substantial amount of time due to the issue of clothes and getting lost, and he didn't know how much longer he had. Auntie Xu informed him that the stage was in the Yayin Garden near Ninghui Hall. Li Yu made to hurry there, but he caught a glimpse of a few bamboo boxes just before he left. These bamboo boxes looked familiar to Li Yu. Auntie Xu generously opened a few to show him. "This is the fish food His Highness asked for specifically. There are many kinds, though it's not anything rare." For some reason, Li Yu's nose started to sting, as if he was about to cry. He pointed at the box holding red fish food. "Could I take some?" Auntie Xu said, "Of course. The kitchens have plenty, so we won't run out. But this is for fish. Are you sure you want some?" Li Yu nodded. Yes. Auntie Xu packed up half a box for him, assuming he also had a fish. Li Yu stuffed it into his sleeve the way people in ancient times did. Then he thanked Auntie Xu and headed toward Yayin Garden. As he passed Ninghui Hall, he definitely had to hold himself back from peeking in, Li Yu thought warily. At this time, the main characters, Top and Bottom, were meeting. It had nothing to do with him, and there was no need for a fish to do anything. He steadfastly avoided looking in the direction of Ninghui Hall. At Yayin Garden, he could hear the sounds of the opera in the distance, but the guards outside Yayin Garden stopped him and asked to see his identification. Oh no, Li Yu thought. No one had checked him in the kitchens. Why did he need to be checked at the opera? Besides, where was he supposed to get such a thing? It hadn't occurred to Li Yu that, because he was wearing Auntie Xu's son's old robes and cloth shoes, he still looked like a servant. The manners rules stated that ordinary servants were not permitted in Yayin Garden, which was why the guards stopped him. Li Yu didn't dare argue with the guards. He didn't have much time left. He didn't need to watch the opera, and if he wasn't welcome here, then there were no other places where he could visit. Li Yu decided to go somewhere else, but as soon as he turned around, he came face to face with a familiar figure. Wasn't that Wang Xi Gong Gong? Li Yu barely had time to open his mouth to greet him when Wang Xi waved his hand, and all the nearby guards surrounded Li Yu. "Capture that person!" Wang Xi was still panting. It was clear he had been running for a while. Just a few minutes ago, he had been scouring the garden with Prince Jing. He hadn't paid much mind to the news traveling around. That is, until he heard a servant say there was a young lord dressed in only inner robes wandering around the manor. The more Wang Xi thought about it, the more likely he thought that this was the thief who stole Prince Jing's clothes. He pondered further. The clothes had gone missing together with the fish. That meant the person who stole the clothes was the thief who stole the fish. He immediately alerted Prince Jing, sending someone to fetch him so he could take a look. Li Yu was shocked at seeing Wang Xi stop him. There was no way all his arrangements in Prince Jing's room had been found out that quickly. Then he remembered he was now human. He had to be careful not to reveal anything and raise Wang Xi's suspicions. Li Yu smiled as he asked, "Wang Xi Gong, what is it?" Wang Xi scoffed. "You thief! You dare ask when you stole His Highness's fish?" Li Yu did a double take. Wang Gong had always been cordial toward him. He wasn't used to being yelled at. Sob, sob, sob! Wait, did they already discover the fish plushie and the window he had purposely left open? There wasn't much time left. If he was captured by Wang Xi and transformed into a fish in front of all these guards... Li Yu wanted to calm down, but this wasn't something that could be solved by calming down. He had to find a place to hide first. He couldn't turn into a fish in front of all these people. An idea struck. He yanked something out from inside his sleeve and yelled, "Over there!" He hurled the object with all his might. With Wang Xi and the guards distracted, he turned on his heel and broke into a sprint. Wang Xi originally hadn't been certain if this youth was the thief, so he had bluffed. But now, seeing him run away, that meant he really was guilty. But the thief was too quick, and Wang Xi didn't get to see what he had flung before he made his escape. Wang Xi gritted his teeth, terrified the person might have thrown the fish out. He quickly ordered a few guards to take a look, while he and the rest of the guards gave chase. Li Yu sprinted as fast as he could and found a room to hide in. Meanwhile, Prince Jing had been searching with a few people in the gardens. After receiving Wang Xi's message, he rushed over to meet up with them. Together, they trapped Li Yu in the room where he was hiding. It was quickly confirmed that what the youth had thrown was fish food. There was no doubt about it. This person had stolen the fish. Wang Xi couldn't have been more furious. Once he caught that person, righteous justice would be doled out. Not only had this person caused trouble during the banquet, they even dared to steal the prince's clothes and his cute, lively fish. They deserved to be sliced through thousands of times. "Hurry up and come out. Hand over the prince's fish, otherwise you'll have to face the consequences." Wang Gong yelled fiercely as he banged on the door. Li Yu poked a hole in the window and peeked out. Prince Jing stood outside the room, grim-faced and holding his sword. But as soon as Li Yu laid eyes on Prince Jing, his fish instincts kicked in and he wanted to swish his tail. Then he remembered he was human right now. Prince Jing didn't know him as a human. If they met, that sword in the prince's hand would stab him to death. Wang Xi wanted him to hand over the fish. On the one hand, he was very moved. On the other hand, this wasn't what he wanted at all. The fish in question was right in front of them. What was Li Yu supposed to hand over? At first, he was planning to wait until everyone had left before leaving the room. But with the situation as it was now, Prince Jing and Wang Xi were both waiting for him like predators outside the burrow of a rabbit. There was no way he was leaving anytime soon. Li Yu's tears were practically flowing down his face. All I did was go out and eat. How did I end up in this situation? Suddenly, the system beeped a warning. "User, you cannot maintain your human form much longer." Stupid system! It usually played dead, but now it was giving him a countdown. He was about to turn back. It had taken so much work to transform just once, and now it was all going to be over. Li Yu only had time to eat one meal, but that wasn't the most important part. The important part was that right now he was trapped in this room. If he turned back into a fish right now, how was he supposed to explain how a human disappeared at the same time the fish appeared? Li Yu had an idea. Counting down the time, he yelled at the people outside the door. I won't leave. Come and get me. If you catch me, I'll hand over the fish. Li Yu was trying to buy some time for himself as well as prepare for what was to come. When a cornered person made such a bold challenge, the reasonable assumption was that they'd laid some kind of trap, so the people outside usually wouldn't barge in right away. He thought this would be enough to make Prince Ting falter for a bit, but he barely finished shouting before Prince Ting broke through the door. Li Yu yelped in alarm. A youth Mu Tianchi had never seen before was standing stock still in a jade green robe. The young man glanced back at him before hastily escaping out the window. Mu Tianchi wasn't going to fall for the same trick twice. He had previously been fooled by the open window, mistakenly believing that the thief had left that way. The thief's deception had led him to look in the wrong place, and he failed to catch the thief. This time, he made sure the person had absolutely no escape out of the room. He had several guards stationed at each of the windows before ordering Wang Xi to yell at the thief within. Mu Tianchi chased after the youth, his long legs carrying him across the room in just a few strides, but the youth had already leapt onto the windowsill. He looked over his shoulder and flashed Prince Jing a mischievous smile. Mu Tianchi froze. Was it just him, or did this youth... He was a delicate, clean young man, his eyes as bright as colored glaze. There was something unbelievably familiar in the way his lips quirked up. Mu Tianchi hesitated for a moment, but the moment cost him. All he managed to catch was a single corner of the suspicious youth's robe. In the blink of an eye, the youth jumped out of the window. Mu Tianchi wasn't concerned, though. He waited quietly for the guards lying in wait to capture the youth, but after a while, he still heard nothing. He made his way outside to look for himself. The hidden guards reported that they hadn't seen anyone. Mu Tianchi furrowed his brows and spotted a heap of clothes piled up beneath the window, and on the ground was a tea bowl with his fish inside, swimming happily. Okay, you guys. No, those chapters 17 through 20. Did y'all find it funny? Because I found it really funny. These chapters were very, very entertaining. I don't really have anything to say about that last chapter other than it was just hilarious. But I am wondering if Prince Jing is going to think that maybe his fish had transformed into a human. You know, I'm thinking maybe he won't think that's too out of the realm of possibility because, I mean, how did the person jump out the window and then suddenly, boom, there's the fish and then the clothes are on the ground? Like, in my mind's eye, even if that happened to me in our real reality, I'm definitely thinking that. So we'll see what Prince Jing thinks because he seems to be smart thus far. Okay. And he sees that his fish is a little more humanly than others. So I'm going to give him some credit and say that he's going to say, this fish turned into a human for a little second. Anyway, this is funny because what is that phrase? Even the best laid plans often go awry. Yeah, that's definitely what happened here for Liu. And it's just funny because it was like, you know, he seemed to have all of his bases covered. And I was like, yes, seem is the key word. Because there are definitely some things that you're going to forget. Now, what I originally thought was going to happen was that instead of the servant dancing, attracting Prince Jing's attention, I thought it was going to be Li Yu in his human form. And then, you know, that person was going to go missing. And he was going to be like, where is that person? You know, a whole Cinderella thing, but not necessarily Cinderella because just a fleeting glance, not a whole dance. But that is not what happened. Nevertheless, he saw Li Yu, and when he cocked a little smirk or whatever, he was reminded of his pet fish. So that's pretty cool. And, you know, it's pretty interesting that, I'm sorry. No, I'll stay on my thought about the rewards. So to me, it seems like the rewards are actually going to become vital for the completion of future quests. So they're kind of less like rewards and more like helping tools. As far as his new quest to gain a deeper understanding of Prince Ting, I highly doubt he's going to be able to do that. Well, I won't say he can't do that as a fish, but I feel like that's something that he can definitely do if he transforms into the human form. But even just thinking about him winning the little plushie and then that helping him to be able to turn into a human and blah, 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 I just have that theory that they're going to be more like helping tools. So as far as accepting them, not accepting them, he'll probably be accepting them things. And then the last thing I have to say is oh no, actually, no, that's it. That's it. So, yeah, this was a fun few chapters. I'm super excited to read the next four. I hope you all enjoyed. Please let me know your thoughts in the comments, and I'll see you next time. Well, I